Hello again, everyone. We're in chapter 7 of the 10 chapters, and it just keeps getting deeper and deeper, and I am loving it. This week, we're in chapter 7. We're talking about developments in sustainable transport. And Henry, why don't you take it off right here? This could be an interesting discussion, I believe.
Thank you, Terry. Yeah, we're talking about sustainable transportation, chapter 7 in my book on the roadmap for sustainable business and net zero carbon emission. And the transport sector is an important sector because it consumes a lot of fossil fuel. And it's been contributing to about 30% of the global emission of greenhouse gases that is related to energy and fossil fuel. So it's an important sector to focus on if we want to reach net zero emission and carbon neutrality by 2050 or 2060 around the world.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We've had a lot of discussions along this line, and today's discussion around transportation and the transport of what's going on out there. What does it represent within the transportation industry, and how things are starting to change? Never fast enough, obviously, but at least it's changing. And there's some different things for us to think about, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about these types of things. Raising your voice here on social media. Speak up if you believe in climate change and what's going on out there. There are some naysayers. There always is. And I think it's important to keep the dialogue open. Because the more it's talked about, the more people begin to realize there's more to it than just a few scientists raising a flag and a few activists rallying around that flag to have something to do. It's a lot more important than that. Look at the weather around the world right now. Right now, massive heat waves have been going on in the United States and North America. And Henry, before we came on today, you were talking about how hot it is over in Southeast Asia. Maybe you can talk about a little bit about that.
Yeah, this is actually all related to these very high temperature around the world is all related to climate change. The greenhouse gas emissions around the world has contributed to global warming. And this is now resulting in many parts of the world actually experiencing extremely high temperature. And, this is the UN has warned that this is actually going to be the year with the highest average temperature around the whole world, So this is really quite frightening and alarming. And that this highlights the importance of all the countries working around the world to try to reduce greenhouse gas emission and to mitigate the negative impacts of climate change.
Absolutely. We've said this before, and it bears repeating. As the oceans warm up, so does the intensity of cyclones, hurricanes, various severe weather patterns, and not only the severity of them, they tend to move a little slower, so they are far more destructive than we've seen in the recent past. Yes, we've had an occasional hurricane in North America, and certainly we have in Asia and the Western Pacific, certainly. But But we really get to think about that, ladies and gentlemen. La Nina, La Nino are far more important now than they were 10 years ago. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, you're starting to really understand that. And thank you, by the way, for following us through this series. And for those of you who are new to the joining of this, we're going to pop up an advertisement here. This is the book. Okay. This is amazing reading. Henry's my friend and colleague. We talk all the time. And when I read his book, certainly I'm going to support him because he's my colleague and I believe in what he's doing. Until I read this book, I almost couldn't put it down. And it's quite heavy reading, but it's encouraging. It's not only sounding the alarm, but explaining why the alarm's going off, ladies and gentlemen. And that's really important. COP26, we talk about a lot here. And Henry, I'd like you to talk about sustainable transportation and clean fuel highlights from COP26, if you would.
Yeah, COP26 was the very important international climate meeting that was held in Glasgow. Over 200 countries attended this, and high on the agenda was green transportation and green transport fuel. And one very encouraging outcome that came out of that is that the Glasgow Declaration of Zero Emission Cars. Over 100 countries signed the agreement, the Glasgow Declaration on Zero Emission Cars, so that they can all reach the target of having zero emission cars in their country by 2035. And these countries, recognize the importance of eliminating fossil fuel cars, replacing them with electrical vehicles or hydrogen vehicles or fuel cell cars, so that they can reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions from their country. And they understand that the fossil fuel cars has been responsible for 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions globally and from their countries. So if they want to reach their Paris Agreement target of net zero emission and carbon neutrality by 2050 or 2060, then it is paramount that they have to reduce their fossil fuel cars by zero emission cars, which includes electrical vehicles, hydrogen vehicles, and biofuel and other form of clean transportation.
Absolutely. Henry, last night I was laying in bed thinking about this discussion today and the different things. We're talking about transportation, ladies and gentlemen. For us business people, I'm a business owner. Henry's a businessman, lifelong business people. We're also talking about hopping on the climate change train and developing more sustainable product lines that can be produced out there. And guess what? You get to charge for that. It's a revenue stream. It's not just a bunch of hippies out there raising signs and doing those types of things. We're talking about people making money off of these deals. Somebody's got to make money off of this. Might as well be you, ladies and gentlemen. You chief executives out there, think about what it would take to, here's a good example. In the Sahara Desert, they have developed a wind chime, a wind turbine that's circular. It's not the big wheels like you see out on the oceans and those kinds of things. They take water out of the air, ladies and gentlemen, water out of the air. These things are not big. Okay. Well, the first thing you think of, well, if I want to put that in my backyard, it's just going to look obnoxious. So paint it. Paint it multiple colors so it looks like a tree whistling in the wind. Okay. It can be in the front yard or in the backyard. There's a lot of us up there. We have little cabins in the woods and cabins on the lakes and things like that. Well, what would it be like for you to go solar off grid out there in those localities where when you are not using your direct solar energy or what have you, it bleeds back into the network, especially in the summertime. You're not there all week long at the cabin and you're not using a whole lot of electricity. Well, where's that electricity going? It's going back into the grid to support blackouts, to keep blackouts from happening. This is smart technology that once you understand there are the variables of what this can represent as a business person. And, rich people don't throw their money around. They're frugal. Some people call them cheap. Most people call them smart people. Okay. So start being smart people, start doing this kind of things. There's a gentleman in, I want to say Southeast Asia to be safe, but I think it was China, who has invented a super white paint, the most reflective coating available on the earth today. It is amazing for cooling down buildings and those kinds of things along the equator or what have you. Making your building green is not just a funny thing to do. It's cost effective and it makes things happen. All right. There's a lot going on out there that when you think about it from a business perspective, those of you in the fossil fuel industry, those of you who are selling the fossil fuel cars, get hot. They're going away. So be in the forefront, not one of the followers. You make a lot of money that way. That's just talking from a businessman standpoint. We're also talking from our hearts and our soul on behalf of our grandchildren. Okay? My co-host and I are no spring chickens. We're up there in the age limit. We've got some grandchildren and working on some great grandchildren out there. And we want a nice world for them to live in and make money and be business people if they want to, or dig holes in the ground all day long. That's up to them. I want them to be able to be living in a place where they can dig holes in the ground all day long. Okay? That's where this type of thing comes from. Now, what about regional sustainability and the transport net zero developments? You have a subchapter here in chapter 7 that's quite interesting, Henry. What's the regional things going? What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's amazing, actually. It's very interesting when you dive into the different regions around the world. You can see that different have recognized the importance of sustainable transportation and green mobility. And many different countries are pushing ahead with new regulations or phasing out fossil fuel cars. One very important aspect is many countries who signed the Glasgow Declaration of Zero Emission Cars have pushed ahead with announced targets of phasing out fossil fuel cars and with internal combustion engines by 2035. Good examples include Hong Kong, UK, and other different leading cities and countries around the world. And they will replace this with electric vehicles, zero emission cars, or cars that runs on biofuel or hydrogen. And in fact, they have many of this. They have already demonstrated that they are technically feasible. We've all seen electric vehicles, now becoming very, very popular. And China that has been pushing electrical vehicles extremely aggressively and fast, and has become the country with the largest amount of electrical vehicles and largest electrical vehicle market in the world. Norway actually is also in Europe been one of the leading countries on promoting electrical vehicles. And some, like you say, Terry, some companies have made extremely good business, like Tesla and in the US and globally, and also BYD in China and now expanding globally. And these are really amazing companies that are participating in green transportation, but whilst developing themselves into a major sustainable business that is going global. This is an amazing story.
Yes,
and this
yes.
is really amazing for all the CEOs around the world to study their transformation.
Yes, my business partner and wife recently was traveling in Northern Europe, and she commented a few times about people riding bikes. Yeah, that's in Europe. That's a norm, but and a large amount of people have been riding on electric powered bikes, where you charge up by pedaling, you charge up the electrical pod in the bike, and when you get tired, you just let it go by itself. But there's a large amount of people that are doing that these days. And let's not forget, there's some different ways that transportation can be modified. Dubai's doing some interesting things about the way they lay out their cities, and the going back to the raised train system and those kinds of things, where you can use the trains, transportation ports and things like that to help with providing shade and those kinds of things. They also can assist in moving the air more efficiently and more steady, so that you keep the especially in downtown areas where it's all concrete and asphalt, the more air that's moving all the time, the better. And so those are all different things that we get to think about in the public sector as well. Some thoughts on the public sector. Do you have some final thoughts today around the net zero developments that you're seeing globally?
Yeah, the public transport sector is actually a important sector in the whole area of green transportation and mobility. And in many, many countries, I think they have been leading, many governments have been pushing the public transport sector into phasing out fossil fuel buses into electrical buses. And also, quite impressively, many countries are now developing hydrogen buses. A very good example is in Japan and in China. In both the Olympic in Japan, in Tokyo, and in the Winter Olympic in China, both the countries have been pushing hydrogen buses, using hydrogen buses to transport the athletes from the Olympic Village to the games locations. And this is really good, because the only emission from the hydrogen buses is steam. And I've also ridden in the hydrogen bus in the Beijing Olympics, and they are very, very quiet, very, very comfortable, and there's now a lot of research and developments in China, in Japan, and in Europe particularly on developing green hydrogen manufacturing. And this is very important for the energy security of the world, particularly taking into consideration the Ukraine war and the security of gas supply around the world. That they have all come to realize that green hydrogen could be an answer for them to reach energy security as well as energy sufficiency and independence. So this is really a wonderful green field that a lot of countries are now actively developing and putting research into.
Absolutely. You know, we as human beings, when there's a catastrophe or a major emergency around the world, flooding, COVID, you know, there's a lot of things. We put a lot of effort and a lot of news, carry this kind of stuff about what's going on. Well, news agencies, here's a challenge for you. You know, you love talking about the bad stuff, you know, bad mouth in China. Well, China's doing a lot of good things too. So, you know, let's balance that out. More importantly, let's get, you know, if nothing else, ongoing segments about what we're talking about in the news. Okay. There's some incredible things going on out there. And very sadly, you read them on social media, some little news post by an individual who read that in some small little magazine on the net. That's just not being a good citizen. Your job, news people, is to inform. Okay. Yeah, sell newspapers is a lot of it, and we're business people. We understand that, but and sustainability. There's a lot of people out there, a large part of the population that wants to hear about that kind of stuff, and they'll tune into your news broadcasts and to learn about what's going on out there and to keep excited instead of worrying about and stressing out. You know, am I going to burn up in the next 10 years? Let's change our mindset from the greatest catastrophes to what's coming. Okay, let's talk about what's coming, and let's talk about what we're doing about it, even on the smallest scale. I talked about putting wind instead of the big turbine. You know, you can get a circular wind turbine that looks kind of cool in the backyard of your house that can do a lot for you. Not only can it add to your electrical net, but it can also pump water. It can take water out of the air to water your lawns and your landscapes and things like that. Let's think smart here. Let's think about what I can do for the world that's good for me as a person sitting in my house in rural Chicago, or where I'm at up in the mountains of the Appalachians, or steaming in Hong Kong like my good friend here is doing right now. What can I do about those types of things? Highly reflective curtains, so that they're super white on the outside to pull the heat away from your apartment or your house or whatever. Let's think about the big picture as we think about our own stuff. People want to start, they think about themselves first. Good, I want you to think about yourself first, because yourself and another self and another self is going to change the world. Okay, that's the big picture. Any final thoughts for today, my friend?
Thank you, Terry. I think it's been great talking with you about sustainable transportation and also the importance of climate change. I mean, I think the announcement by the UN of the red alert to the world, you know, when they issued the red alert climate warning to all the countries around the world, saying that, you know, this is likely to be the hottest year in the whole history of the earth. You know, millions of years is really a strong wake-up call. And if we don't work together, then, you know, the red warning from the UN also says that, you know, we could be in danger of bridging the 1.5 degrees C temperature rise target, global warming temperature rise target by 2027. So this is now critical. We need all to work together to control global warming, to reduce greenhouse gas emission, and so as not to destroy the earth for our future generations, so that, you know, we can still have a place for our children and grandchildren and their grandchildren to enjoy. So I agree totally with you that we in business, in academia, in all parts of the world should all work together to try to control climate change and to reach carbon neutrality and achieve the net zero emissions target that was agreed in the Paris Agreement and in the various COP meetings around the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. Good ones, good ones. Ladies and gentlemen, like we've been talking about, it's no longer a theory that could take place. It's happening now. Thanks for joining us. Henry, I'm loving this. Can't wait to chapter 8. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for stopping in. And for those of you who pick up the recording after our live today, thanks again. Bye-bye for now.